The millionaire invited the black cleaning lady as a joke. She arrived like a diva, and everyone was in absolute shock when they found out who she really was. The main hall of the Blackwood mansion in Beverly Hills exploded with malicious laughter when Victoria Sterling descended the marble staircase wearing a dress that cost more than the annual salary of most of the people present. It wasn't laughter of admiration. It was pure, cruel mockery. "Look who decided to show up," Richard Blackwood whispered to his guests, raising his glass of Dom Perignon champagne. "Our dear cleaning lady." Victoria was 35 years old and never imagined she would one day step foot in that ballroom as a guest, even if it was a joke. For 2 years, she had cleaned every inch of that mansion, always invisible, always silent, watching those rich people treat each other with rehearsed falsehoods while treating her like furniture. The invitation had arrived 3 days earlier, delivered with a cruel smile she knew all too well. "Charity gala on Saturday," Richard had said, handing her the gold envelope. "Maximum elegance. You surely have something suitable in your wardrobe, don't you?" The laughter of his friends echoed through the hallway. It was an obvious trap, an attempt to humiliate her publicly, to put her in her place in front of California's high society. Richard had even invited social reporters to document what he called an educational moment. "Let's make a bet," Richard said to his wife, Helena, as Victoria vacuumed the day before. "$100,000 says she doesn't have the nerve to show up. And if she does, she'll be the entertainment for the evening." Helena laughed maliciously. "You're terrible, Richard. The poor thing will probably show up in something borrowed and feel so out of place she'll leave within 15 minutes. But Richard Blackwood didn't know two fundamental things about Victoria Temps. First, she had grown up in halls like that, long before she had to clean them to survive. Second, some storms don't destroy. They just teach you how to dance in the rain. As she walked through the hall under the mocking glances, Victoria kept her posture straight and her gaze serene, like someone carrying secrets that could turn that world upside down. Her steps were sure, calculated, as if each movement were part of a long-rehearsed choreography. "My God, she really came," whispered Patricia Weston, wife of a senator, to her friend. "And look how she's dressed. Where did she get that dress?" "She probably rented it and will pay for it in 10 installments, replied Vivian Chambers, daughter of an oil magnate, disguising her own insecurity with cruelty. How pathetic. What none of those people knew was that Victoria hadn't bought, borrowed, or rented that dress. She had simply gone back into her own past to retrieve it, a past that Richard would have done anything to erase had he known it existed. Richard approached her, chest puffed out with arrogance, surrounded by his billionaire friends. His confidence was sky high. After all, he had orchestrated this as a public display of power and social control. "Victoria, what a pleasant surprise. I never doubted you'd come. After all, when a person like you receives an invitation to an event like this—" "A person like me," Victoria repeated, her calm voice cutting through the air like sharp silk. "Go on, Richard. Finish your sentence." For a microscopic moment, something in her tone made Richard hesitate. There was a firmness there that didn't match the submissive woman he knew from the mansion's halls. But arrogance quickly took over again. "Well, you know, someone who doesn't normally frequent this kind of environment. You must be feeling quite intimidated by all this elegance." "Intimidated?" Victoria smiled, not a submissive or nervous smile, but something dangerously serene. So much so that some nearby guests stopped laughing instinctively. "Intimidated?" she repeated softly, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made Richard take a step back without realizing it. "No, Richard, I'm feeling exactly where I've always belonged." The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough for the atmosphere of the party to change completely. There was something about the way Victoria spoke, the way she moved, the way she occupied the space. It defied all expectations of who she was supposed to be. Richard cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "Well, I hope you enjoy the evening. I'm sure it will be educational for you." "Oh, I'm sure it will be educational for all of us," Victoria replied, her gaze sweeping slowly over the group of guests, as if cataloging each face for future use. Richard was having more fun than he had imagined. Victoria hadn't run away in embarrassment, as he had expected. She remained there, her strangely confident posture beginning to bother him in an inexplicable way. "Everyone," Richard announced loudly, tapping a silver spoon against his crystal glass to get attention. "I'd like to introduce our special guest tonight, Victoria, our dedicated cleaning lady." Laughter echoed through the hall like cruel waves.
Cell phone flashes went off as socialites took photos to post on social media with sarcastic captions. "Richard," Helena murmured beside him, feigning concern, "don't you think you're being a little cruel?" "Cruel," Richard laughed loudly. "I'm giving her the opportunity of a lifetime. When else would someone like her ever get the chance to attend an event like this?" Victoria stood motionless in the center of the room, all eyes fixed on her, but instead of the embarrassment they expected, there was something disconcerting in her expression. A serenity that seemed to come from someone who had weathered far worse storms. Patricia Weston approached with her group of friends, all wearing poisonous smiles. "Victoria, dear, tell me, how long did it take you to choose that dress? It must have been so challenging to find something suitable." "Actually," Victoria replied with a calmness that made Patricia hesitate, "this dress has a very special history. It belonged to my mother." "Her mother?" Vivian Chambers laughed nasally. "And where did your mother get a dress like that? Some fancy thrift store?" Victoria smiled, but there was something dangerous in that smile. "My mother wore this dress the last time she was in a ballroom like this. That was 20 years ago, when she was still Victoria Temps Blackwood." The silence that followed was deafening. Conversation stopped as people realized something important was being said. Richard, who had been laughing with his friends, turned slowly. "What did you say?" "Temps Blackwood," Victoria repeated, her voice cutting through the air like a sharp silk. "It's funny how some people choose to conveniently forget their own family history." Richard's face began to pale. Helena instinctively grabbed her husband's arm, sensing something was terribly wrong. "What is she talking about?" "He's lying," Richard muttered, his hands shaking slightly. "She's a deranged employee trying to get attention." Victoria reached into her small purse and pulled out an object that made several guests gasp. It was a ring. Not just any ring, but the traditional Blackwood family engagement ring, engraved with the family crest and set with the distinctive blue sapphire passed down for generations. "This ring," Victoria said, holding it up for all to see, "was given to my mother by her father, Henry Blackwood, my grandfather, the man you told your children died without an heir." Richard was now visibly shaken. "Where did you get this? How dare you steal?" "Steal?" Victoria laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Richard, you can't steal something that's rightfully yours by birthright." Patricia Weston, watching open-mouthed, whispered, "My God, do you think she's telling the truth?" "Impossible," Vivian murmured, though her voice no longer sounded confident. "Richard would have told us if he had a cousin." Victoria heard the whisper and turned to them. "Cousin?" "No, dear, I'm not Richard's cousin." She paused dramatically, locking eyes with Richard. "I'm his half-sister." The room exploded with murmurs and muffled exclamations. Richard looked like he had been struck by lightning. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, his voice cracking. "My father would never— You are making this up." "You are making this up," Richard shouted, his voice breaking. "You are making this up. You are an employee trying to get attention." You, 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 you. Well, you know, someone who doesn't normally frequent this kind of environment. You must be feeling quite intimidated by all this elegance. Intimidated?
Mr. Blackwood, I have transcripts of 5 conversations you had with Dr. Hamilton between 2003 and 2004, where you threatened to ruin him professionally. Finally spoke, her voice slicing through the chaos like a blade. "Richard, you didn't just kill our father, you stole 20 years of my life." "I didn't kill anyone," Richard shouted, pointing wildly around the room. "You're all lying." "Then explain this," Victoria said, connecting her phone to the mansion's sound system. A recording began to play. Richard's voice was unmistakable. "Hamilton, you're going to keep your mouth shut about anything strange you found in the old man's blood. If you open your mouth, I guarantee you'll never work as a doctor again. And as for that woman and her bastard daughter, they'll have to fend for themselves." The silence that followed was absolute. Even those who had defended Richard now turned away from him, as if he were radioactive. Helena stared at her husband in horror. "Richard, You really did this? 20 years! Victoria screamed, her composure breaking for the first time. 20 years of cleaning my own father's blood off the hands of his killer. She took a deep breath and regained her deadly calm. You want to know how I got all this evidence? I didn't come to work here by accident. I applied specifically for this position. I spent 2 years preparing, gaining access to this house, collecting proof. Richard tried one last desperate gambit. Even if all that's true, it doesn't change anything. The inheritance was distributed years ago. David Chun smiled faintly. Actually, Mr. Blackwood, when there is evidence of murder, all assets can be redistributed according to the original will. And we have a copy of Henry Blackwood's actual will. Victoria approached Richard, who was leaning against the wall like a cornered animal. Do you know what my biggest mistake was, Richard? Believing you would change on your own. Please, Richard whispered, all arrogance gone. Helena, the children, this will destroy our family. You destroyed our family, Victoria said, the moment you chose money over justice. Richard collapsed into an armchair, completely defeated. His transformation from arrogant millionaire to exposed criminal had taken less than 2 hours. Victoria looked at him one last time. He was broken, but that was only the beginning. What Richard didn't realize, and would soon discover in the worst possible way, was that Victoria had spent years gathering evidence not only about her father's death, but about every financial crime, blackmail, and act of corruption he had committed over decades. She had woven a web of justice so meticulous that his downfall would be spectacularly complete. The next 2 hours turned the most exclusive gala in Beverly Hills into the biggest scandal California high society had ever witnessed. Live. Richard now sat on the ballroom floor, his back against the wall, watching his entire life unravel in real time. Diane Morrison had connected her laptop to the mansion's projection system. Documents, photos, and recordings appeared on the giant screen for everyone to see. This, Diane narrated, is a bank transfer of $200,000 from Richard Blackwood's personal account to Dr. Hamilton dated 3 days after Henry Blackwood's death. The memo reads, "Silence is golden." Helena was now on the other side of the room, as far from her husband as possible, crying silently as she processed 20 years of lies. And this, Diane continued, is a recording of Richard talking to his accountant about hiding company embezzlement. Richard's voice echoed through the room. I need you to make the numbers dance. If anyone finds out I've taken out $20 million over the last 5 years, I'm ruined. Blame it on market fluctuations, expansion costs, whatever. Patricia Weston whispered to her friend, My God, he stole from his own company. Victoria stood in the center of the room, calm as the eye of a hurricane, watching each revelation destroy the man who murdered her father. David Chun approached with a new folder. Mr. Blackwood, in addition to the criminal charges, I must inform you that Miss Temps is filing a $50 million civil suit against you for wrongful death and misappropriation of inheritance. 50 million? Richard croaked. I don't have 50 million. No, Victoria said softly, but your company is worth 120 million, and half of it has always been mine by right. Diane Morrison continued. We also have evidence that Richard Blackwood blackmailed 5 local politicians, bribed 3 judges, and diverted charity funds to personal accounts. Each new revelation drew gasps of horror. People who had arrived as Richard's friends now recoiled from him as if he were radioactive. Victoria, Richard said in a broken voice, please, you got what you wanted. Stop this. Victoria stepped forward, knelt before him,